Hello, everybody, and welcome to Music Industry Insights Worldwide. Today we have the awesome Joanne with us. Hi, Joanne, how are you?
Hi, very good. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to see you, and thank you for coming on the show. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and what you do?
Oh, that's a huge question. So in summary, Joanne Lockwood, pronouns she, her. Uh, I'm in my very early 60s. I turned 60 a couple of weeks ago.
You don't look
So,
it, you look fab.
oh, thank you. Having spent a long time saying I'm in my 50s, my early 50s, my mid 50s, my late 50s, I'm now, yeah, well and truly 60.
Oh,
Uh, I gender transitioned. Yeah, there's no exact date. We know there's no exact date. It's kind of
yeah,
like this sort of big target area. So I guess I came out to myself. It's probably the point I started to admit it around 2014. It's about
brilliant.
11 years ago. So I started being proactive about it from 2015, 2016. So I always can't count the cutoff date as March 17. So that's
Okay,
kind of the
yeah,
before and after. But yeah,
okay,
we will have a dry run, don't we? We'll have a bit of a test driving.
yeah, of course.
Married, couple of kids, been married for 38 years this year, 40 years together,
Oh, congratulations.
survived the gender transition.
Oh,
I spent most of my career in IT,
yeah,
and at the point I transitioned 10 years ago, I moved into what I do now, which is trans advocacy,
yes,
EDI, DEI, training awareness, professional speaking. So I do a lot of stage speaking
yeah.
and just basically putting myself out there, talking about what my passions are, which is around inclusion, belonging.
Well done. It's really nice to see, actually, and it's nice to see a fellow trans woman doing the work because I think, a lot of the stuff around the trans community is specifically aimed at trans women. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you think trans women are treated at the moment, especially across media and in society and as a whole?
I think we're probably tr- treated no worse than we've always been treated. It's just there's
Mhm.
now less restraint
Yeah,
on people's bigotry and bias. In the
yeah,
past, they would cover it up. It's a bit like being racist, being sexist, being whatever. It still existed under the covers, but
mhm,
people were kind of, oh, can't say that. But now I think we've taken the covers off, and people feel empowered to
yes,
express their anti-trans rhetoric, their trans negativity, their bias, whatever their opinions are, without fear of reprisal. In fact, society is bending away
mhm.
and towards the anti-trans rhetoric. And I saw a recent YouGov survey that came out a couple of weeks ago,
Saw that
which
myself.
is showing that the acceptance of trans people, and let's not beat around the bush here, is trans women. That's the target. People
Yes,
people don't care about a trans man as long as they're not a threat to anybody, and they're not. And non-binary people just confuse the F out of people. They
they
just that people don't get it.
absolutely totally
So
agree.
all the vitriol is aimed at trans. I'm not saying transmasculine and non-binary people don't have their own struggles.
Yeah,
I'm not going to try to undermine that,
yeah,
but the vitriol is predominantly aimed around trans women as being threats, predators, whatever you want to call it, pedophiles.
yeah,
It's really abhorrent language
yeah.
to a group of people who just want to get on with their lives.
Exactly. We've caused no harm to anyone. We're just living our lives as an authentic self. And I think, some of it is really sad when a lot of it is specifically aimed at us in a community where we're already marginalized. And I think the trans movement has kind of moved slightly. So what's your thoughts on the non-binary situation and also gender non-conforming people? Do you think that should be under the trans umbrella, or do you think that should be kind of separated away from trans men and trans women?
I'm an inclusionist. I'm not an exclusionist. I'm not
Yeah,
here to
yeah,
tell people where they do or don't belong.
yeah.
I think there's too many labels, there's too many divisions, there's too much hierarchy of being good enough, not good enough to fit in my community.
Yeah,
I think we as people who don't conform to the biological, wherever that might be,
yeah,
rules that were designed over the millennia.
mm,
I don't think there's room for anybody to be divisive on this. I think what you have to say is, hang on a minute. We understand the difference between identity and expression. There are
mhm,
people who want to express themselves in various ways.
yeah,
Cis people want to express themselves in various ways.
yes,
So we can open up the world to express ourselves as we want. We know that. We
yeah,
can fall in love with who we want. We can have a rampant night of passion with who we want. Doesn't matter what gender, sex, or otherwise they have.
yeah,
So we're all kind of cool with those things. But as
mhm,
soon as we say, hang on a minute, my gender, my sense of self, who I know I am in my head, as soon as that deviates from this sort of hard and fast binary masculine feminine
Mhm.
assigned at birth, people freak out. And I think what we as a trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, gender expansive, trans plus community, whichever phrase you like and use, I don't think there's any room around division in anything and hierarchy.
No. I do think there's a problem though with the issue on trans, because a lot of people do aim at trans women, and I do not see a community as a whole sticking up for trans women. So that's something I do look at, and I do think, well, if we're a society and we're a community that's supposed to be together, where is the support for trans women? Because I don't see that support coming from inside community myself.
No, I see what you mean. And with anything, it comes down to privilege.
Mm,
And
mm,
if you have passing privilege, hopefully people who are watching and listening to this understand what passing means, blending in society, being undetectable as a trans person, however you want to describe it. If you have that privilege, you kind of think, well, hang on a minute, I've got to look after myself here. If I speak up, if I'm vocal, then maybe people will go, oh, you must be trans as well. And I know many trans masculine people that are using another term, stealth.
under the radar. Yeah,
But
completely.
under the radar, they've grown a beard, they've lost some hair, they've deepened their voice, they've buffed up, they look absolutely fantastic and amazing as a guy,
Yeah,
and they get on with life indeterminate. People just don't realise they're trans, and which is great.
yeah, yeah,
So they don't want to necessarily speak up and out themselves.
yeah,
So I think there's a level of people who have achieved this kind of plateau of I'm okay, I
yeah,
don't want to rock the boat,
yes,
therefore I won't speak up.
yeah,
Otherwise, people will turn on me. So I
right.
think it's the
Get
the
you.
biblical Judas thing, isn't it? Kind of, I don't know you. I'm going to deny who Jesus is. That time
Yeah,
we're looking after ourselves. I think that's human survival. It's not right. It's not wrong.
mm,
It matters to some people, and
yeah.
I'd love to stop talking about being trans, but I, I don't think I can. I don't think it's fair
Yeah,
to not do myself what I ask of others, being an advocate, being an ally, standing up.
yeah. And I think it's also a really great point you make is a lot of trans men can pass and they go under the radar. And not everyone who is even trans, as a trans woman, not everyone wants people to know their personal private business, which I totally
No,
understand. And I think, people like ourselves have stood up because we were trying to drive change, but we're also trying to educate, we're trying to inspire, we're trying to empower our community as well, aren't we? And I think this is the struggle that we face as well. And I think trans women find it a lot harder to pass than what trans men do, definitely. So what's your thoughts and feelings on this passing privilege? Because it's something that I've heard a lot of, but I don't really think, especially when it comes to trans women, I don't think we have as much passing privilege as, say, for example, trans men. And I think you can generally tell a trans woman from a normal woman quite easily, and generally you can. I think there's always something that gives it away. And I think
what
that's something
are you
else.
saying? I'm not a normal woman? Are you saying I'm
Well,
not a normal woman?
well, I wouldn't say I'm a biological woman. I was just say I'm a trans woman. And I've always said that, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a trans woman. I'm not a real woman. I can't, I wouldn't want to say that I'm a real woman because I'm not biologically born a woman. So I would just say that I'm a trans woman. And I understand some of the
Yeah,
issues
I'm
women.
not native.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not native. I'm not from birth. And I think, but the danger with using normal or real or biological is those terms themselves could be hierarchical,
Mm,
laced with privilege and identity. So, yeah, of course, I'm respectful of people who have had their womanhood from girlhood, from babyhood,
yeah, yeah,
and
totally.
and I understand my lived experience of who I am is different to someone who
Yes.
was assigned female at birth with all the bits of a female
Yeah.
at the point of conception. Their experience has been different, and I fully accept that I'm never going to menstruate, I'm never going to have the same upbringing other women do. I'm never going to give birth.
Mm,
Um, there's a whole lot of things I will never experience, but there are also many cis women who
yeah.
don't experience those things either. So I think the danger of being reducting people down to their biological components
Mhm.
is also part of this biological superiority. And I think
It's also
we've got to
small.
try and,
Yeah. And I also think, sorry to interrupt you there, I also think there's a massive kickback from women in society. Because if you did look at the YouGov polls, I think there's been a change of the acceptance of women from 42% to now 37%. And I think, again, a lot of this is to do with this rhetoric of trans women are not women. So what's your thoughts on trans misogyny, and how do you think trans women have to deal with that?
Um, yeah, if you look at a lot of the anti-trans rhetoric, yeah, the attack vector is very clearly you're a man
Yeah.
pretending to be a woman.
Mm.
That's the kind of, therefore I don't want men in my space. You are a man, therefore you shouldn't be in my space.
Yeah.
That's the rhetoric. That's the underlying current. Yeah, men are dangerous. Is whether it's misandry or whatever form of man hating or being genuinely afraid or anxious around male company because of past trauma, all those various issues,
Yeah.
religious beliefs, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that exists, but that QED, you are a man, therefore I break the link there. I my estrogen levels are probably equal to many premenopausal women. My testosterone levels are way below even most cis women's.
Yeah.
Um, we yeah, anybody who's been on any sort of HRT, whether it's cis HRT or trans HRT, knows that hormones are powerful things. They change a lot of it. And we talk about the male brain, the female brain. And I think hormones have a huge influence on how you act and show up in the world, the emotional side, the aggression side, the impetus. And that's so, so what I'm not trying to do, again, create some privilege to say, well, yeah, my hormonal balance is that of a cis female. Therefore, I'm privileged. Therefore, I have more rights. I'm not trying to say that at all. What I'm trying to say is that by saying that I have a male persona is not true.
It's
It's
wrong.
not
Yeah,
true.
it's wrong. Yeah, I totally
I have
agree.
as much empathy for other women as other women do, and I have as much desire not to have a predatory man in female spaces as
Ex-
other women do.
Exactly. Same
I
here.
don't want to go into a toilet and see a predatory man in there. I mean, I get nervous if I walk into a gender neutral toilet
Mm.
and there's urinals in it, and I'm thinking I start getting all twitchy myself.
So do I.
I'm not.
I've done
Yeah,
that too. I'm so glad you touched on that, gender neutral toilets. What's your, let's talk about this because that's really, really interesting as well. Like when you're going into a gender neutral toilet, and we've obviously been through what we've been through, does that give you a bit of dysphoria? Again, does it remind you of the old days?
yeah. I mean, I've walked into the wrong toilet sometimes, and you walk in there,
Yeah.
you rush into the cubicle because you're desperate, and you come out and go, oh, poo, there's urinals, or there's some bloke standing there having a wee, and you think, oh, wrong place. And then suddenly I feel really, really uncomfortable with it.
Mm.
So I'm not uncomfortable with the concept specifically. It's just I've been in some where they are literally urinals and cubicles marked as gender neutral, pick a side.
Yes.
And I did find it uncomfortable being in that sort of male peeing environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I felt it definitely. But yeah, when I talk about gender neutral toilets, we talk about single cubicles,
Yeah.
wash hand basins, floor to ceiling doors, safe space, not these kind of American style uh,
More
doors that are 2 foot from the floor and 2 foot from the ceiling where you can peer over or climb underneath. That's a misnomer. That's an American thing. It's not a British thing. It's not a rest of the world thing. It's and I actually don't like giving toilets a gender. By saying they're gender neutral, we've assigned something to a toilet,
yes.
which is really just a place to carry out a bodily function.
Yeah.
It's
And I'm so glad you mentioned that because I've been on several music industry kind of panels and talks, and they've actually changed all the toilets because they know a trans person was coming. They've changed all the toilets to gender neutral toilets. How would you feel if that happened to you as a trans woman? Would you think that that's going a bit too far, just specifically because there was a trans woman there in a
well,
woman's?
for anyone listening to this episode, I mean the whole idea of gender neutral toilets is to ensure that people who don't identify as male or female
Can
have
use?
a door
Yeah.
that has their name on it.
Yes.
So I'm quite comfortable with gendered toilets.
Yeah.
I'm quite comfortable with a
Okay.
female toilet because that's the toilet I'm going to go into. So I'm not going, I must have gender neutral. But people who are non-binary, gender non-conforming, or people who are maybe gender fluid will
Yeah.
feel more comfortable going into a toilet where there's no policing of bodies, no
Which I
policing of
understand.
identities.
Yeah. I totally
So
understand.
provided I'm not policed
Yeah.
as unacceptable in a female toilet,
Mhm.
I'm quite happy with that. So the gender neutral toilets aren't for me per
Yeah.
se,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I support them for the
Yeah.
people they are for.
Totally
And
agree.
also, I mean, let's face it, how many times have you had to queue for half an hour to go for a pee in a ladies?
I know.
I was at the British Museum. The queue was like
It's a
50
nightmare.
people long.
gonna wait yourself by the time
So
you get to the toilet.
yeah,
Literally.
I think there's some statistic somewhere that says men queue on average for like 18 seconds for a toilet.
Yes.
Women queue on average for like a minute and a half. Whereas
No.
if you combine all the toilets into gender neutral and make them all available, it makes the waiting time equal for both men and women and non-binary people.
No.
And it brings it down to about 45 seconds. So actually women benefit, men have a harder time. So
Yeah. Okay. I
I'm all
didn't.
in favor.
You learn something new every day, as they say. So yeah, Joanne, thank you very much for talking about that. And tell us a little bit more, like, do you see a lot of representation? Do you see a lot of authentic, real representation at the moment across the media when you're looking at the trans community? How do you find that at the moment, what you see?
I think when you look at media, there's plenty of people bending the edges, gender non-conforming, gender expansive. A lot more people are declaring themselves coming out as non-binary now. Obviously, lots of movie stars. I think people see outing themselves as non-binary as being a safe option. You know, they're not challenging anybody. They're confusing people, but they're not
Yeah.
creating a problem as a trans woman or a trans man.
Mhm.
And then we're seeing people evolve maybe from that non-binary identity into more femme leaning or more masculine leaning or being somewhere in the middle. I think we're seeing lot more non-binary representation because people just want to step out the BS of gender and they want to
Which
get
makes
off that wagon. So I think inevitably what we call visible trans women are
yeah.
um, less socially acceptable.
Yeah.
So we still tend to be playing niche roles
Mhm.
or deliberately in a music industry where you're looking for that gender expansive type image.
Mhm.
We're very rarely represented in a mainstream media, movie, film, whatever, as
Mhm.
just a character. We're
Yes.
always the trans character. Where black people were 10, 15, 20 years ago, the black character, we had the
Yeah.
female character, now we have the trans character.
Yeah.
I've seen Rebecca Root play a character in movies, and you wouldn't have probably spot. Yeah, I thought, oh, that's Rebecca Root. Oh, wow, she's in a movie. So I was going, yay! And in the Barbie movie, we saw a trans character in there that wasn't declared as trans Barbie, but all the trans community went, yeah, we've got
Yeah.
trans Barbie,
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So we are seeing some micro appearances of trans characters who aren't playing a trans character,
Yeah.
but it's still few and far between. And I think we've got a long way to go
Yeah.
for that normalization and not having cis people playing trans characters, not having straight people playing gay characters, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So what more could we do to educate society on this? And what more can we do to support our own community to ensure that we do get that real representation?
A lot of it is norm. Excuse me.
It's all right.
A lot of it is normalization and representation and visibility.
Yes.
You can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
There's many of the people I speak to are trans, non-binary, are nervous about putting themselves in the public eye, nervous about going onto TV, radio, being impressed,
Mhm.
because we know it damages your brand, whether you like it or not. Yeah, it's going to have a huge impact. You know, you'll get a Twitter storm, you get people criticizing you. Well, let's face it, you look on the front page of Heated or Hello magazine, all these kind of magazines. If you put on a couple of pounds as a woman, you're now fat shamed.
I know.
If you have a bit of a facelift, you're now
Yeah.
Botox shamed. You know, the people want to pick holes in you, they want to shoot you down. So trans people just have a larger surface area of attack.
Yeah.
And people in this current modern anti-trans rhetoric world are unbridled, unfettered in that attack vector. They just want to, they can say what they like, and people can, well, I'm just speaking the truth.
Yeah. And what would you do if you felt that as a trans woman, you've left, for example, I was in the Misogyny and Music inquiry last year for the Houses of Parliament in Misogyny and Music. This year they have Misogyny and Music inquiry, but they've turned around and said, Saskia, we don't need a statement from you this time. How would you feel as a trans woman if you felt that maybe you wasn't being listened to or you wasn't respected as a woman in an environment that doesn't always see us as women?
Yeah, I have an immense imposter syndrome, sense of imposter syndrome as it is, you know.
So,
Um, I don't always feel I'm welcome into female spaces to talk about female issues.
yeah,
Um, I'm always really proud and honored to be invited to International Women's Days to talk as a woman with a different perspective. But I still have this sense of imposter syndrome. What do I know? Commenting on women's challenges. But women have challenges of all over the spectrum. And if I can offer a perspective,
Exactly.
then why isn't my perspective valid? I can also offer a poacher turned gatekeeper perspective. I can talk about how I used to think and how I was ignorant, blind, unaware of some of these challenges.
Hmm.
And I can now speak as a reformed misogynist, if you like,
Yeah.
um, and highlighting some of these areas. And, it's that old Mel Gibson film, I want to know how women think,
Yeah.
I know how men think still. And
Yeah.
I'm not proud of that, some of that history. But the reality is I have some insight
Yes.
as to those safe space male conversations that occur in the locker rooms, in the pubs, in the bars, about how they talk about women in very derogatory and less than
Mm-hmm.
positive terms. I just say not all men.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
not saying all men, but just saying those
True.
environments do exist. And yeah, I can bring that insight. And I think to be excluded is unfair, it's unwarranted, and it plays into this. You're not a real woman. You're a man. How can you have any insight?
And this is where,
And somehow my identity has become political. And I'm now, by being trans, I'm now political.
yes, and that's nothing we set out to do in the first place. We're not political people at the end of the day, and it's something I wish we wasn't so politicized on. And it's so nice to hear you say that, because I think as a trans woman, we go through a lot of things that women go through. They're not the same, but there's some very similar situations and circumstances that trans women are often, vilified or people come for, especially even men. So I don't think we're exempt from misogyny ourselves. But I think certain people look at, for example, a drag queen and would say, that's extremely misogynistic. A lot of drag queens, they would say, oh, is this misogynistic? Because it's trying to kind of be a sexualized version of a woman, and sometimes can be quite derogatory against women. So how do we separate ourselves from that? And obviously having RuPaul's Drag Race, and we have some trans women on there, or some trans identifying people on there. How can we kind of clarify because I think the more our community's kind of grown, the more confusing it's become. How can we make that more kind of crystal clear for people to understand?
Yeah, I'm keen we don't conflate identity and expression. Drag is a performance art.
Yes.
It's a long-standing performance art. This is centuries of performance and art. It's not purported to be anything different.
Yeah.
I appreciate, we look at shows like the Black and White Minstrel Show. That was a performance around the representation of Black people, which has now been correctly, in my opinion, called out and spoken about that as being inappropriate. And I know that some people equate drag as woman face. It's stealing women's identities, as you say, in a sexualized or exaggerated way.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not threatened by it. And
Hmm.
I would say if you are threatened by it, maybe look in the mirror and start to understand why you're threatened. Is it a bias? Is it a phobia?
Hmm.
It is, often when we fall into judgments, it's more about ourselves, our own biases, our own prejudices. So I would say if you are challenged by it, look in the mirror. I can coexist where drag is a performance art. I
Hmm.
can coexist in environments where people have a less than positive view of me,
Hmm.
provided it's not weaponized. So yeah, you can have a view. You can. We've all got the remote control. We can all turn RuPaul off. We can always
Yeah,
mute it
that's
on Facebook so we don't see the feed.
no offense to RuPaul.
But
I do like RuPaul, but there's no offense to that. But I think it's in society as a whole. Sometimes people think, oh, we're all the same. Oh, okay, they're a drag queen, they're a trans, or they're this, or they're that, they're a trans woman. How can we kind of differentiate ourselves in a society that's confused?
yeah, again, I think education is the key. You know, we look at this government, we look at previous governments trying to prevent education in schools.
Yeah.
I think young people are probably more today. Young people are more aware of
And I,
different forms of identity, different ethnicity, different faith groups, whatever, different sexual and also gender.
yes.
I think by trying to not educate people is a mistake. I think we need to create this education because not only do the children learn, but the children then educate their parents.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've known many parents who have found their child educating them on contemporary issues of the day, and gender identity being one of them.
It's great.
I think it's important we don't shut those conversations down.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And obviously, we're in a very multicultural society. And you've already touched on religion. Do you think religion, cultural issues, and political issues have an impact on what we can achieve and how far we can go as a community at this moment in time?
Well, if you take religion, faith, they're all belief systems.
Yeah.
Everybody is entitled to their belief. Religion and faith is a very old belief that's been around since humans ever started communicating and living in community. So we all have this fear or this belief that something bigger is empowering us so that our lives don't seem so bad. So I think, yeah, it's important for people to have that belief structure.
Yeah.
Against the weaponization is using that belief as a justification for bigotry, a justification for discrimination, for exclusion.
Yeah.
So I think if we can try and learn how we can coexist and not fall back, well, it's my religious belief is you're a man, you're a woman, family values. We had to fight this around same-sex marriage, gay marriage, where people say, well, hang on a minute, we'll destroy society if a man dared to marry a man. We've ruined marriage
Mm.
forever.
I know.
And the sky hasn't fallen in, the world hasn't collapsed,
No,
society's got on, and it's now socially acceptable. So
yeah.
if two trans people get married, if two trans people exist, it's not a threat to you. And I think just because it rocks your definition of what's right and wrong,
Hmm.
again, that's judgment, that's
Yeah.
your bias, that's your bigotry.
Yeah.
Step back, look in the mirror, question why you think that. Is your belief real?
Hmm.
Yeah, if you want me to have respect for you,
Yeah.
which I'm more than happy to embrace your beliefs for you,
Yeah.
I don't have to be a part of them. That's fine.
That's lovely. See, I love that. And I love the way you think of things. And you're very open and you're very, you know, understanding. And sometimes I've been in so many different situations and I have to say to myself, it's not you, it's the person. Sometimes some of these issues are stemming from someone's trauma or the way they look at society or the way they look at us as a community. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I've always been open, I've always been accepting, I've always been understanding of difference because I think that's what makes us beautiful as a society. But I do also think, for example, there's certain people in certain places, gatekeepers, that might not accept because they might be a little bit older. They might be from a certain, you know, certain culture that doesn't accept the fact that trans people exist or that we are who we say we are. So how can we change that? How can we try and let people be a bit more open and understanding, but without forcing it on them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think when I went through my own gender transition, I went through an awakening at
Yeah.
that time. I realized that my wife, our children,
Yes.
my brother, my mother, my in-laws, everybody, and my best friends, they didn't get it.
Mhm.
So
Mine
I couldn't demand acceptance. I couldn't demand recognition.
didn't.
What I had to do was I realized that in order to be loved, you have to be lovable. In order to be liked, you have to be likable.
Yes.
In order to be worthy of respect, you have to generate a persona that is worthy of respect.
Yes.
So that's in me and how I show up in the world. So I think how can we as a community, whatever that may mean,
Yeah.
what we should do is exemplify the best of ourselves
Yes.
and show that we are likable, lovable, worthy of respect,
Yeah.
productive, fantastic human beings. And then society will go, yeah, you are. And I think by adopting that, I control me by
Yeah.
controlling how I show up. That's the important thing. I
Lovely.
think we can't worry about everybody else. What we can do is be our best person and influence those around us. And then those people around us will then become allies and influence those around them as well. So I think we've got to though stop the myths, misunderstandings, the blatant negativity, anti-trans rhetoric that's in the media, because that's getting into people's head. The whole YouGov report,
Yeah.
we can trace that back to the negativity that's in the right wing
Yeah.
um,
Interested.
press, the pervasive message that trans women are predators, trans women are threats. We're damaging children. We're damaging this. We're causing this. We're destroying that. So that's the narrative that's coming out. So by being the best person I can be, I'm going to go, I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah, that's not us as a society at all. And it's not the way we come across. And thank you, Joanne, for coming along and sharing your views, you know, things you've been through. If there was a bit of advice you could give to someone who's maybe looking at transitioning or wanting to transition, what kind of advice would you give them?
Um, I think I touched on it just now. Don't expect the world to just embrace you.
Yeah,
You,
yeah,
you need to put the work in. You need to work on your own sense of self. Transitioning
takes
is
time.
not it's not something, you don't fix your problems by gender transitioning.
Right?
The grass is still grass. The
Yeah,
grass is no greener.
yes,
You'll take most of your problems with you, and and actually you'll complicate them. So work out what's important in your life, who is important in your life, and meet them where they're at. Don't expect everybody to meet you where you're at,
mm,
because people disrespect you, people misgender you, they get your name wrong. It will happen.
yeah,
It will happen a lot. So you need to develop a resilience, a bounce back ability, a thicker skin. I'm not saying you should have to, but that's the reality of the world.
reality of it, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
Great advice,
And
great.
don't be a react, don't react, don't be a dick yourself. Just
Yeah,
because you're trans, it doesn't mean say you can't be a dick. You can be a dick as well.
yeah, there's
So
plenty.
again, meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, lovely advice. Thank you, Joanne. If anyone wants to connect with you, find out more about the work you do, or want to connect with you, how could they do that?
If you Google my name, Joanne Lockwood, I appear on the first 4 or 5 pages of Google pretty much.
Yeah,
Other search engines are available: LinkedIn, Joanne Lockwood, website, C Change Happen, SWE, changehappen.co.uk, or joannelockwood.co.uk. Yeah, get in contact, drop me a DM, find me on Facebook. Yeah, I'd love to have a chat.
I love to see you on TV. I love the work you do. I love the advocacy work and educational work you do, especially for the trans community and trans women. Thank you ever so much for coming along, talking about some quite sensitive issues, but I'm sure this will educate, empower, and also help other people to understand what it's like to be us sometimes. So thank you very much for your time and your expertise. It means an awful lot.
And thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat.
And I'll leave all your details in the description below. Thank you ever so much, Joanne. Have a great weekend and I'll see you soon. Bye. Ah.